He's been in the UFC for over a decade, and he's only 30. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your main event.
Live from HBF Stadium Festival Hall. Melbourne Pavilion.
Not even backstage, we're literally outside.
Was that the best fight card in Australian MMA history?
Call me crazy, but make sure you call me when I'm right.
Be good if the Aussie MMA Instagram page would give us a bit of glow up because we're killing it.
Welcome to the Australian MMA podcast. My name is Mitch Tinley. I am your host, and today's guest is none other than the Celtic Kid. Celtic Kid? Celtic Kid. Celtic, I guess we'll never know. Jake Matthews. Now, Jake Matthews is well renowned in the world of mixed martial arts, especially in Australia. He has been at the top of his craft for over a decade, and he's only 30, which is amazing because most fighters come into the UFC at around 30 and don't start peaking until 31, 32. So to have already a decade under his belt is incredible. The best is yet to come from Jake Matthews. He definitely has a shot at being one of the top fighters in the world, and he's got plenty of time to still do it. Now, we talked to Jake about what it is like to get signed at such a young age to the UFC, how he actually did, obviously coming through the Ultimate Fighter, not winning that, having to go back, rebuild a little, then get signed. Then just sort of his ups and downs throughout his career in terms of balancing his career, sort of being the hot prospect, kind of being written off, seeing other guys sort of pass him by. You know, there's other hype trains that have come through, especially in Australia, and he's just sort of he's just been there. You know, does he hold that grudge, or you know, is the best yet to come? We talk about sort of moving gyms, changing coaches, staying away from partying. Now, this is a man that is trained alongside the great Jon Jones, and so he's seen it at every level and says himself, you know, just how little drinking and partying he's actually done. So much so he's even sort of converted to Islam. So we get his thoughts on why he's done that. You know, a blue chip sort of all-Australian boy converting to Islam. So that's an interesting story in itself. Like we said, balancing sort of fame of fighting, all of that sort of stuff, and sort of staying on the right track, why he even got into mixed martial arts to begin with. And of course we touch on some of his close friends in Kitt Campbell, who is fighting for an Australian regional title here, and Jimmy Crute, who is coming back to the world of the UFC and sort of what he sort of has in store. And like I said, it's very interesting if you're a young fighter sort of just getting into mixed martial arts. This is a real one because he sort of reached your dream as quick as anyone. You know, he hit the UFC as essentially a teenager and has grown his way into what he is and sort of the ups and downs he's had since being signed as a 20-year-old. So look, interesting chat. Love Jake Matthews. He's a hell of a guy. I really appreciate him for being sort of very vulnerable and touching every subject and chatting for such a long time as he helps his teammate through a tough weight cut. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, we're going to hear from both of our friends, Jake Matthews' friends as well, at Vex, and on the other side, Jake Matthews.
PRP Global and Vex have joined forces, so keep an eye out. Launching mid-November, they've got a new Vex website and new MMA fightwear range releasing shortly. Vex, designed for combat and worn by the best in Australia.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. This one's a long time coming for me, the one and only Jake Matthews. Mate, welcome.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Now, mate, before I had you on in this interview, you were running around for your boy Kitt Campbell, who's getting ready for his title fight coming up. First of all, how's your relationship with Kitt Campbell? When did you guys first meet? And obviously you guys have been very close.
Yeah, man, me and Kitt have known each other for a long time. So I just recently got in the UFC, myself and Dan Kelly. There's nowhere to train back then. So we just said we need to start sparring. And the first three were me, Dan Kelly, and Kitt. And we'd spar in this little 3x3 meter ring. And we weren't really mates back then. It was just rivalry. Like, we're two young guys. We just bashed each other really bad. They weren't even sparring sessions. They were proper fights. And then slowly over the years, like, we become closer and closer. And now we're good mates, and we're actually almost neighbours. We live like 2 minutes from each other now, so we're very close.
That's cool. Now, it's a real interesting factor of how I got into mixed martial arts to begin with. Was I was on a flight to Las Vegas when I was like 17, and I picked up a UFC magazine, and it had Roy Nelson on the cover. And in this book, I think it was like 2011, maybe it was sooner than that. You were in like an MMA prospects to watch. I think you were 4-0 at the time, and I think you were like 10. And it was like you were the fighter to watch. So you have been on the radar for the UFC most of your adult life. In fact, before your adult life, when did the whole thing of mixed martial arts even start for you? And like looking back, is it insane?
Oh, yeah, I kind of just fell into it. If you like, I always believed I'd be in the UFC. Back then, it was considered an impossibility for someone from Australia, especially a kid who was like 18, 19, to get to the UFC. So, but yeah, I was training football. I had a mate. So my old man trained martial arts and jiu-jitsu for a long time. So there was a little bit of like a push from that side of things. But the way I fell into it, I had a mate from footy who was doing kickboxing during the off season. So I thought, I better stay fit during the off season for footy, because I still wanted to play AFL back then. And I went to the gym, just, still want to play footy. I wasn't really looking at being a fighter, just training for fitness. And then the coach at the time said, there's a fight. This was Tuesday. He goes, Friday night, there's a fight, and they need a last minute person to step in. And it was about my weight class. So I was like, yeah, I'll do it. I'll jump and have a punch on. I was a bit of a rough kid. Used to like fight a lot. So I was happy to jump in and have a fight. And everything just went well. Like, we had a grapple, bit of a jiu-jitsu exchange. We had a stand-up exchange. And then second round, it's a famous video. I threw up a head kick and knocked him out. And first head kick I was thrown in my life, mind you. And it just hooked me from there. It just hooked me. We're in the car driving home, and I was eating a Zinger burger from KFC. And I was about to take a bite, and it just hit me. I was like, I think this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. So I sacked footy that season. And I had one more season of footy because I had a few fights and cleaned them up. But I had one more season of footy, and then I sacked that, and then that's it. Just started fighting from then, and never had a normal job in my life. Just been fighting ever since.
I can only imagine you were like quite the natural at it then.
I was a bit of natural, yeah. I started boxing when I was 12 for footy. I was quite a decent boxer, and so I naturally had a little bit of a good inkling towards martial arts, and obviously playing footy, and I swam when I was younger. I did a bit of gymnastics when I was younger, so just very active as a kid, which definitely helped.
Does that annoy you though when you see the footy highlights of like going into the weekend and you always see the footy players boxing and then just like hitting the pads like this?
Well, no, a few of them are actually good boxers. Is it Jack Viney? I think one of them is a really, really good boxer, and we're supposed to do some boxing training together. Oh, really? I actually played on Jack Viney in the representative grand final.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I had to tag him, and I didn't touch the ball the entire game because he destroyed me. Destroyed me.
Isn't his like brother or someone like Max Viney, who's like a pretty decent grappler? Like I always see him putting up videos of like how to tackle people.
Yeah. I think both the brothers are pretty good. One's a boxer, one's a wrestler.
Yeah.
But they incorporate a lot of wrestling into rugby league and to footy now. So those boys can handle themselves.
Do you miss footy at all?
Nah, not at all. I never really liked, I don't want to cop any flack from this, but I never really liked AFL because we're always a league family. And down in Melbourne, league's very small. So I was I was about 7 years old. I was going to start playing rugby. My old man looked at like where all the clubs were. And you're talking like an hour and a half one way and an hour and a half the other way. And he just goes, nah, you can play AFL. So that's how I got into AFL, and I did pretty good considering. I did a little stint. I did a little stint with the TAC Cup Northern Knights. Played representative for like 3-4 years. So I did too bad considering I didn't really like it.
Jeez, did you ever think about like, oh man, it'd be pretty cool to be drafted or anything like that?
Well, because I was so good at it, that was the plan. Just to, I guess, like I was sort of stuck in that rut where I was like, okay, I'm good at footy. I'm just going to go and be a footy player. And then if that doesn't work out, I'd probably just be a PE teacher or something at a school. And then luckily, I fell into fighting, and here we are today.
I feel like footy is, if you make to the AFL, right, it's an easier way to make a living than fighting. But I feel like the upper end of fighting has got to be like way more sort of benefit. Like you'd rather be an Izzy or a Volk than like I don't know, Scott Pendlebury.
Well, yeah, well, the way I put it to people, like these team sports, footy, A-League, soccer, like they get paid pretty good, but they probably work more than a full-time job. Like these guys, I know a lot of these guys. They got to be at the club at 7 a.m. They got to be there for their prehab. Then they go to do training. Then they have to go and sit in the communal cafeteria and eat the meals that they're given. And then they have to go and do some therapy or treatment. Then they have another session, and then they have to do their own sponsors' obligations, and they have to do the team sponsor obligations. So these guys, like they have their long days. Those footy players, whereas fighters, like a lot of fighters will go train, go home, play Call of Duty, go to the beach, surf. No, like that's the vibe around it. You know what I mean? They don't like myself. I'll go home and I have like other business things that I'm working on, and I'm reaching out with sponsors, talking to my manager. So I'm trying to fill the time with things that are going to bring in income. Whereas a lot of fighters, I think they train, go home, relax, sleep. Like I lived in Albuquerque when I was 18 for a little while, and I was bored. Like we train in the morning, go home, everyone sleeps. We train in the afternoon, we go out, we eat dinner, go home, play PlayStation, and then just do the same every day. So it's what I mean? Like the workload's a lot less than what a team sport would be.
You obviously don't really like that. Like you like keeping busy.
Oh, I love keeping busy. If I'm not, like I've got a 5-acre farm, so if I'm not doing farm work or landscaping, I'm training. I've got, 2 young ones at home, so I'm looking after the kids. I've got, I've got about 3 or 4 businesses that I'm a part of that I have work to do for that. And then other things as well, trying to organise events, trying to bring other fighters out. I love staying busy. Like if I don't have my laptop open doing work or I'm training, I'm looking after the kids, there's no time to rest. And that's how I like it.
What was the first time you sort of bought something real with money from fighting where you went, oh wow, this is my living?
I opened up a gym when I was 19. So I had my first fight. Pretty much all that went into the gym fit out. And that was a place for me to train. So that wasn't really a business. I thought, we had classes running. We had enough people to cover overheads. And I thought, when fighting's finished, then I can market and pump the gym up. But my first fight in the UFC in Auckland, I actually trained in my backyard for that fight. I got photos of me and my younger brother. Me and my younger brother would spar. And my younger brother was like 15 at the time. So we'd spar and train there. And then I'd go do jiu-jitsu at a jiu-jitsu gym. But everything else was done in my backyard in the garage gym for my first fight. So I thought I can't really do that as a pro fighter. So I need to open up a facility. So that's why I opened up the gym. And that was open for about 6 years.
How did you get sort of noticed? Because obviously like Tough Smashers and all that sort of stuff, The Ultimate Fighter helped and whatnot. But how did you kind of get noticed?
I just applied for The Ultimate Fighter. Like I was known around Australia. Every fight I'd go in, I was like an 18-year-old underdog. I was always supposed to get bashed. And then I just kept winning fights. And then I went 6-0, went to The Ultimate Fighter. I obviously didn't win that, but I remember at the Ultimate Fighter tryouts, we're all good. Like, I consider us like we're kind of even mates even. Stu Dare. So Stu Dare is obviously big on the scene. So he comes up to me at the tryouts and he goes, I got cut from the tryout. He goes, I got cut in this phase. He goes, oh, what about you? And I said, no. I said, I'm still in. And he's like, what? And then he walks off. And it just took me the wrong way, like rubbed me dirty. He's like, oh, you're a kid, pretty much. Yeah. So I got back from the Ultimate Fighter, and I said, I'm gonna fight Stu Dare because he was a weight class up, so he was a middleweight. I said, you know what? I said, I'm gonna fight him, and I'm gonna get into the UFC. So I called out Stu. We fought. I won that fight, and then I got into the UFC. But before I got to the UFC, me and Dan Hooker were gonna fight each other on the main event in a show in Melbourne.
Jeez.
So I think we were like 4 weeks out from that event. We were the headline. And we both got a contract to fight on UFC Auckland. but we're going to fight each other in about 4 weeks' time.
What was it like when, you get to the Ultimate Fighter? In a way, you kind of feel like, not you've made it, but like you at least your skills are valid and everything like that. But then when it gets cut short, are you like, oh man, like it's over, I'm not that good, or did it just light a fire in you?
Nah, I thought that was the end of the world. That was
Oh,
the
really?
first time I ever lost. I mean, I'm talking like I had, 20 plus gold medals from jiu-jitsu tournaments. I used to win everything. I was one of those kids that I was so good, I'd always get my way and I'd always win. You know what I mean? I'm beating grown men. I'm 18. From 16 to 18, I was beating guys in their 30s. I had 10 amateur fights, one all 10. I had 6 pro fights, so 16 fights undefeated. And I went to the Ultimate Fighter, and that was my first loss. And that was like I couldn't even comprehend what just happened. I remember I went to the bathroom and I was just bawling my eyes out crying. And then I realized I had my microphone on. And I was like, oh, these bastards are going to take the audio from that and put it up on the show. So then I wiped off the tears and I walked out and I was like, oh, But yeah, I couldn't even comprehend what just happened. That was like, and even till today, like I don't say like I'm in the habit of accepting a loss. I still take it just as hard, but you do have to have a mindset where it's like, okay, I've lost. I don't have a time machine. I can't go back in time and change it. So how do we go forward and learn from it?
Would you have rather sort of, if you could kind of do it all over, would you have rather maybe like hung around the regional a little bit longer before you got to the UFC? Because you've done a lot of your learning in the UFC, or do you like how it's panned out so far?
Yeah, I would have liked to have, probably lost a few less fights. But it's all a learning curve. Like Joe Silva and even Sean Shelby, the matchmakers, they said the easy part's getting to the UFC. The hard part is staying in the UFC. And I've been there for 10 years now, so I've really taken on board like that hard part and made it work and done well. And I wouldn't change things. I think I feel now. A lot of fighters say it, but I definitely feel different in training. The coaches say, since I've sort of hit my late 20s and just hit 30, things have changed in training mentally, physically as well. So I really do believe that we're coming into our peak. And, I've shown that in the last, handful of fights. It's just little things we have to tweak to hit that mark. But we're right up there, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, and to like a lot of people get into the UFC at 30, and that's a nice young age to start your career. And you've been around for a decade. Is it weird? And this is going to be a bit of a bizarre question, but do you get somewhat like jealous at times when, say, you look at like a Jack Della, right, who hits the ground and is exploding, and I mean this in the most least disrespectful way possible, but he's like skyrocketed sort of past you to where people are talking about him for titles and yada yada, and you're like, man, I've been here for 10 years. Like, do you build any form of like, I don't know, grudge?
No, not at all. It's a good question actually. No, not at all. Like, because I'm gonna be there soon. You know what I mean? And when I am, all the people that come out of the woodwork, excuse my French, but they can go and get fucked pretty much. You know what I mean? The ones that were there from day one, that stuck around, that supported from the start, they're the ones that I'm going to bring up with me. But we know we're going to get there. Like, starting at the UFC so young, there's a double-edged sword. There's downsides to it because you're obviously not going to skyrocket and become a champ at such a young age. It's probably, it might happen one day with someone, but it's very, very hard. But at the same time, the lessons I've learned absolutely invaluable. So I wouldn't change things at all. And no, I'm happy for the Aussie guys. You know what I mean? I'm gonna be up there very soon with them. So yeah, it is what it is. But like I said, if I could go back and say, I could get in the UFC later and have one of those big runs, I honestly wouldn't change it.
And with guys like, I think it's like Paul Roses Jr., the young kid that was signed, do you have any advice for people that are signed 18, 19, 20 to the UFC?
Yeah, from my experience, try put your trust in the UFC. The matchmakers, they're in those roles for a reason. And I have found that they do want to build the young guys up. Like, they never gave me a fight that I wasn't really ready for. They never threw me to the wolves. You know what I mean? Maybe a little bit when I'm a bit older now, but when I was younger, you could definitely see that they're trying to sort of, lack of a better term, like groom you to be in the UFC for a long time. We had fighters that we're trying to call out, and without saying you're not ready for it, the UFC would just give us like a different kind of opponent. And I felt like in that regards they did help build me up. They could have, I went on a few win streaks when I was younger. They could have thrown me into the top 15, and I could have got destroyed. And then I'm cut from the UFC by the time I'm 22, and then that's it. But the way that they gave me my opponents, I've never really had a fight where I felt like I was completely out of my depth and I couldn't have won that fight. So, put your trust in the matchmakers, and then obviously, just have a good team around you. And obviously now with some of the MMA gyms, that everything's in one sort of under one roof now, and the gyms are very good. But back in my day, you kind of had to not be afraid to outgrow a gym and move on. I can say there's a lot of instances where I was training at certain gyms. If I didn't progress and move on to another gym, I wouldn't be in the UFC anymore, or be where I am in the UFC. So, you have to sort of put your career first and know when to move along and progress your own training.
Have you had any experiences where it was tough for you to perhaps have that conversation and leave a gym?
Yeah, absolutely. But they're all I've been lucky enough, they're all been understanding. I know there's some coaches that aren't, but the coach also has to understand they have a role to play, and then they have to understand when they've hit their ceiling. You know what I mean? And then, to be honest, the next step from where I am now would be going overseas and maybe moving the family overseas, to be honest. So I've sort of climbed the ladder of where I need to go. And in Australia, it's hard. Camps can be very disjointed. Your boxing coaches here, strength coaches here, jiu-jitsu coaches here. You got to try and get them to coordinate over WhatsApp. It's not under one roof. So that's the only hard part about Australia, is there isn't one gym where we have the best of all aspects in one gym. Some gyms might disagree and say that they do have it, but I'm telling you right now, as a UFC fighter who's traveled the world, trained in other countries, seen the facilities these other gyms have, we don't have that in Australia yet. So the next step for me would be going overseas, I'd say.
Well, I mean, forgive me for speaking out of turn here, and from a guy that's not from Victoria, I'm in Western Australia, but I feel like from the outside, Resilience looked like it had that, because it looked like it had all these brains all in one spot. Why didn't everyone sort of stay there?
No, Resilience, we had good numbers. Obviously, good judo was there. But in terms of having really good striking coaches, or it's more the coaching I'm talking about. So we didn't have an elite level, high level wrestling coach at Resilience to teach us wrestling. There wasn't a really high level striking coach to teach us striking. So that's more what I'm talking about. It's easy to get bodies. Yeah. As long as you got young, fit, hungry kids in the gym, doesn't matter what level they're, even amateurs. Most of the guys we spar with are amateurs. But sometimes they're harder than pros because they're so hungry and young and fit and healthy. But it's more the coaching. It's in Australia, to get a high level wrestling coach is hard enough as it is, let alone trying to get that into a gym with elite striking, with elite jiu-jitsu, with elite conditioning. So that's sort of what's lacking in Australia. But it'll get there one day. But as a fighter now, I have to make the determination: can I afford to try and keep traveling to all these different gyms and have a disjointed camp, or do I need to, shift somewhere else for the time being and get into one of those gyms? We call them super gyms. That's what we call them in Australia. We call them super gyms because they've got everything under one roof.
Are you close to leaving?
I'm close to leaving because I just want to leave and just get overseas. And I've got young kids now. I want them to experience the world, experience different cultures. So it's multiple silver linings. One is that aspect for the family, to give them that kind of experience of traveling and experiencing the world, and then also seeking out somewhere that I can train, which I'm doing now. We're heading off to Bangtown next week, so we're going to Bangtown. Me, Jimmy Crute. We're going to go there, train for about 10 days. So I'm sussing that out. Maybe the next place I go would be Dubai. I'll suss that out. I feel like you do need to go and test out the waters first to make sure, one, is the training good? Does it suit me? And number two, could I move the family here and potentially live in this place? So I'm sort of putting the feelers out there. And so soon we might see myself moving overseas for, not forever, just for, it might even be for, 3 months at a time, training, coming back. But we'll see.
Yeah, I feel like that's where your age is a real advantage as well. Is like you don't have that pressure of time. I know we all sort of take time for we take advantage of time and take it for granted. But at 30, like everything you've done in 10 years, you're s- you're starting where some guys are just beginning their career. So you've kind of figured some shit out. And so I feel like the next 10 years, you're making decisions that they won't make for another 20.
Oh yeah, I've had fights where like I messaged Short Shelby and I said like I need to fight because I need money. You know what I mean? Like back during years ago. But now it's at the point where don't give me a fight for 12 months. I don't really care. We're not in a rush. We can wait for the right opponent. The way I've set up, like I was talking before, like the things I do with business. Some people say, "Oh, it can take away from your fighting career." I say not really, because the way I've set things up, it's a passive kind of income where I have the luxury of sitting back waiting. I'm not in a rush to jump in and take stupid fights, which I've done before. So we're at that point now where, I couldn't get a fight at the end of this year. I probably could have pushed and just got a nobody fight, but I could say, no, I'm going to sit back, let the body rest up, just increase my training over the Christmas period, and then we'll just wait till early next year to fight and hopefully get, a decent opponent, someone who's close to the rankings. So, yeah, for me, there's no rush at all.
Yeah, I've talked to Jack Jenkins about that quite a bit, about balancing life. And he said that basically, like, he's known you for a long time, and he says that the way you're balancing life now, he's like, he reckons that this is like the best version of Jake we're going to see, because you're really enjoying life as well as fighting.
And I appreciate that from Jack. Yeah, Jack's the best. We've known each other a long time. He's such a good guy. Yeah, no, I feel like, when you have that, like I've had fights where I had, for whatever reason, I had I put the story out there on a podcast recently, but I had 54 cents or something in my account. When I was fighting in Melbourne, I had to get my partner at the time to use her credit card to pay me, to get me a taxi to go to her house so she could feed me, so I could eat after weigh-in, because I couldn't afford to eat anything. I've had those fights. I've been in those positions. It's not a good feeling to have to rush into a fight and fight when you're not mentally ready for it. So that's why I structured things in my life the way I have. And yeah, Jack's exactly right. I train, I go home, I got a 5-acre farm. We've got veggie gardens, fruit trees, and the kids there. It's just it's a really nice lifestyle. Travel overseas, enjoy that side of things as well. And then yeah, but no, right, don't rush into fights and just take the fights when it's the right time. And obviously, hopefully, we start making waves where, like, I do want to be active. I don't want to sit and have one fight a year. That's not what I'm saying. But, we still want to take the right fights and hopefully get, 2-3 fights a year. Because where I'm sitting, like, if I have, one good win next fight, if that's not already a ranked opponent, the fight after will be a ranked opponent. And then you're talking, you could be 2 fights away from being top 10, 3 fights away from being top 5. So I'm teetering right on that edge. We just need to make smart decisions, and we could get there.
We talk about balancing life and everything, and it's been like relatively well documented with another guy you're quite close with, Jimmy Crute, who seemed to he was sort of weighing up his career at some point. I heard from a lot of people that Jimmy was a real, like, sort of all or nothing sort of fight career, and now he's kind of really trying to balance life again. Have you had any advice for him, and have you sort of helped him work through that at all?
Nah, Jimmy's kind of like me in a way. He likes to just work things out on his own. I guess. He might have close mates that he talks to. Like, we've been training partners a long time, but he obviously might talk to his family and his friends. But I feel Jimmy's someone who will just go into himself to figure things out. Very much like the way I do. And you kind of have to. You can't really rely on people to help you all the time. You have to be able to figure things out in yourself. And all I can say for sure is that Jimmy's back. He's back in the gym. He looks good. He's complete 180. Like, he's a different person. That's all I can say. You know what I mean? We get along very, very well now. Like, we always did. We're always training partners, but I feel like now we'll progress to be more than just training partners. We'll be good close mates. Like, we're going to Thailand together. We train together multiple times throughout the week, and he's looking good. He's looking good mentally, which is more important than physically. I'm sure he's been fitter and stronger and quicker previously in the past, but that's not what's important. That's not what I see. I see that he's someone who's mentally dialed in now, which is going to be a dangerous Jimmy.
Is it weird to sort of be in this sport where you're so close with guys, but say you could train with, we'll use Jimmy for example, right? You could train every single day, right, together to get to the next level. But if he wants to go off and, get drunk and party and you're like, oh no, I need to stay here, you've got to kind of let your not saying that he's doing that, but you've got to let like your friend and teammate kind of fade away if you want to stay on track. Is it weird in the sport that at times you've had to let teammates almost be self-destructive so you can stay on your path?
Training partner relationships, that's what they are. You know what I mean? Like me and Jimmy, we haven't really caught up much outside of training, to be honest. And obviously now we're starting to progress beyond that and go to Thailand together and whatnot. But like I only have a very, very small core group of mates. I'm talking like 2 or 3 mates, one of them which is my brother, that I actually go out of my way outside of training or anything else to catch up with. And these are guys that are very much on the same page as me. Like I'm one of those guys, like people like me, but I don't necessarily go out and to all these social gatherings and whatnot because I've wanted to, like you said, I've wanted to stay away from, if they're out drinking or they're going out and doing this and doing that. Like you've never seen me once at a UFC after party. And, so I'm sort of like losing that networking kind of thing there, but I've never once been in my entire career, never once been to a UFC after party. But I make sure throughout the week I'm conversing with the guys, I'm networking, so they do like me, but I've sort of kept everything on a professional level. So I don't really get sucked into that kind of, sorry, so I lied. Okay, so this is a good example. Exhibit A. Fucking Jimmy Crute and Ben Sassoli dragged me out after UFC Auckland, the last UFC Auckland, and I woke up in the back of a taxi in South Auckland somewhere on my own. That's we'll leave the story there, but that's exactly what happens. So that was my one experience where I said this is exactly why I don't do this, and now I'm going back to my old ways. I'm not doing it anymore.
Do you reckon it's ever cost you any sort of, well, I guess dollars and cents and stuff at times to not be more sort of at the after parties? Because I know that you can make a mozza doing those sorts of things.
No, absolutely, yeah, absolutely. But so the last 10 years, I've always been like the clean cut Aussie kid. I don't talk, I don't trash talk, I don't do shoeies, I don't really swear, I don't do collaborations with OnlyFans chicks. So I've kind of financially lost out in that sense. But recently we've noticed that we're getting big sponsors come on board purely because of the reason that they like the fact that I'm a role model and I've been consistent through my whole career. They go, you haven't jumped ship to, and sold out to go and do like, for example, like the stuff Mirab does. He does a lot of things with girls. That's what he wants to do. That's fine. But I've never gone, there's an opportunity to make money. I'm going to go do that. In fact, I've been offered like $15,000 US to shout out a gambling page. And I said no, because I don't support gambling. I'm not, I'm not someone who gambles. I don't like promoting it. And I said no, $15,000 US on the spot. I said no. And my manager goes like 15,000 US. I said, yeah, no, thanks. You know what I mean? So, but now we're getting sponsors. Like I fought in New Jersey, quick story. And there was a New Jersey based company. They looked at the entire fight card for New Jersey, including local fighters. And out of all the fighters, they picked me to sponsor and threw me like a stupid amount of money. And we said, why did you pick me? Because I'm an Aussie, I'm not even American. And they said, because of your social media presence and the way that you hold yourself. And they said, that's why we want to sponsor you. So now after 10 years, we're starting to see the benefit of that.
That's cool. That's, was it ever like, oh man, I need the 15 grand, but like these are my morals and my goal? Or have you always been in a position where you've been able to say no to sponsors?
I've been in positions where I can't say no to sponsors, but I still do. I'm stubborn, man. I'm stubborn. I'm telling you, like, if my heart's set on not promoting gambling, like I'll go to the food bank and pick up tin food before I sell out and do that. I promise you, like that's how stubborn I am, and my manager knows this, and it's made his job a little bit harder sometimes, but he understands, and he's again, we are starting to see the benefits now.
Interesting. I mean, look, it all sort of, the proof is in the pudding. I mean, you've been at the highest level in your art for a decade. You don't get that. I mean, unless you're Jon Jones, you don't get that by like partying at the absolute sort of peak and pushing it to the limit. I mean, I guess I'll touch on that as well. I mean, you're one side, he's the other. You've trained with him. He fought on the weekend. To see a guy like Jon Jones who has pushed it to the absolute limit and he's regarded as the GOAT. I mean, what's that like? Is that just, I guess, gift from God type thing?
No. John's a hard worker. He's an animal inside the gym and outside the gym. leave that at that. But but he puts the work in. Like his work ethic is like 0 to none. But he's one of those guys, like, he works hard and he plays hard. But I think obviously, like, being a champ so young, like I can't say that I wouldn't have done those things. Winning the belt at 23, being considered, one of the best ever at such a young age, all that money coming in, like, we can't sit there and say we wouldn't have done those things as well. You know what I mean? But I lived in Albuquerque for a little while. I've been to Jamaica with Jon Jones, Arthur Jones, Chandler Jones, Clay Guida. All those guys. I've seen what they're like. You know what I mean? Hardest work is in the gym, but they also like to enjoy themselves as well. And there's nothing wrong with that, really, to an extent, obviously. But yeah, no, it doesn't surprise me that John's at where he's at.
Would you? I mean, I guess even you getting in at the age that you got, did it go to your head at all? Did you get arrogant?
It went to my head in the way that I'd walk into fights thinking that I was just going to win it like that. And they're the ones that I'd lose. So, it didn't necessarily send me off to the club to go and think I'm God's gift. I'm going to go party and do this and that. It more affected me in my fights. Like, honestly thought I was untouchable at some points. You know what I mean? And I'd go in. So my cycle was I'd go on a win streak, and this is even until recently. I go on a win streak. They'd put me against this up and comer. Let's use the Andre Fialho fight as an example, because that's the popular one. Like, I had a win streak. They put me against Fialho, who's supposed to be the next welterweight champion. Had 4 knockouts in 3 months. Absolute monster. I'm not supposed to win that fight. I'm a big underdog. I end up cleaning him up. Then the next fight, I take a stupid fight against a no-name, and I'll walk in there thinking I'm going to beat them easy, and I'll lose a fight that I shouldn't lose. So that's been my cycle for my entire career. So that was a good lesson. Like, I take it in a way like, okay, so we know what we can do. We know when we're peaking, what we can do, like the Fialho fight. But we have to go back to the gym and work just as hard for the next fight. We can't be overlooking any opponent. So that was a lesson I took from that.
Talk about your faith and your change of faith, if that's the right choice of words. What sort of drove you to sort of go in an unexpected, sort of untraditional sort of journey in regards to faith? When it comes to changing faith, everyone always thinks, his friends made him do it, or some sort of outside influence. It was 100% just a self-found epiphany, I guess. I was actually mowing my lawn on my farm, and I just put a podcast on. I needed a really long podcast. So I picked a history of Islam, and I was never baptized. I was never actually any religion beforehand. I was never a Christian or anything. I was probably agnostic, I'd say. So I was listening to the history of Islam, and then when you understand that, the 3 Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, they actually all have the same prophets. It's all the same story up to a certain point, and there's, but it just completely threw a spanner in the works. I honestly thought that all those religions were all completely separate, but when you find out that they are essentially all the same Abrahamic religion, they just have a few differing points of view. That just really intrigued me to just start researching. So I was researching, all the religions and the stories of the prophets, and Islam just made sense to me. And the thing about Islam that appealed to me was it's a religion that's implemented into life more than any other religion. Like you do certain things because you're supposed to. And then it sort of clicked with me that
I've trained at a lot of gyms that were like primarily, Muslim brothers training at these gyms in Melbourne, and they're always the most respectful gyms. You walk in, everyone's saying hello, giving you a hug. You train, people are bringing you tea after training, and you're like, what's wrong with these people? Like, why are they so nice? And then once you sort of look into it, you understand like, okay, it's because they're Muslim. You know what I mean? Like you're sort of brought up with that kind of, they're brought up with having that kind of respect and mannerisms. And it's something that I felt just aligned with me naturally anyway. And then, so it just sort of led me to studying and studying the worship side of things. And I felt like it's just something that fit into my life. I think everyone needs some sort of belief, some sort of religion in their life. And that was one that just spoke to me. So that's kind of in a nutshell, that's kind of the story of how I found it.
Well, without being ignorant, do you have to pray like multiple times a day? Is that the whole thing? Do you do that?
We pray 5 times a day. But again, like I've always been a disciplined person. Like I've never really, I can count on one hand the amount of times I've drank. I've never taken a single drug in my life. I've always trained every day, 2-3 times a day to a schedule. So the praying, 5 times a day, it's again, one of those things where if you pray on time throughout the day, it's easy to get done. It's like getting a task done throughout the day. If you don't pray and then you have to fit in all 5 prayers at one time at night, it becomes kind of like a burden, right? So
can you do that?
Sometimes when you're training for like 3 hours, you miss a couple of prayers. You've got to sort of mash them together. That's when it kind of becomes like again, lack of a better term, like a burden, I guess. But I implement that into life, and I say, okay, like throughout the day we have tasks to do, whether it's doing the dishes or doing something for work or cleaning the car. If you delay and procrastinate and then you have to do them all in one hit, it becomes a burden. So it just sort of teaches you like you do things on time when they're supposed to be done, and it makes your life easy. And so there's a lot of lessons that I implement into my training, and I feel like the biggest mindset change especially even in my training and my fighting has come from my religion now.
I feel like if you cram 5 prayers at the end of the day, the powers that be are like, come on, Jack, come on.
Oh no, definitely. It's definitely frowned upon. I don't even know if it's accepted, but you know what I mean? I'm going to
smash them all out.
Yeah, I'm going to do it and then ask for forgiveness afterwards. But, the way with the training schedule and stuff, it's kind of, sometimes, life gets in the way. But the religion's very lenient, it's you kind of just, you do the best you can do. Everyone's got their own journey. We can't judge anyone else for the way they do things. And, so that is, But again, that's sort of the story of how I found my faith.
Awesome, mate. A couple more before I let you go. UFC Sydney, how likely is it that we get you on the card? What's going on?
But honestly, bro, like I have no idea. I wouldn't think that it would be this hard to get an Aussie on the card. The only thing I can think is that the UFC have someone in mind that's a good opponent, that they're maybe waiting for that person to fight, or maybe that person's fought and they're waiting for them to get the thumbs up. Otherwise, I mean, if you're still going to give me any old opponent, I'm sure they would have done it by now. So hopefully they're waiting on one or a few opponents of high stature to step up and say they'll fight.
Have you talked?
Hopefully. Sorry.
Have you talked back and forth with like Sean Shelby or anyone like that?
Yeah, I mean, define talking. I mean, like Sean's busy. He gets like 1,000 emails a day. So if you get one line from Sean, that's good. Usually it's 2 words. But he pretty much just said, when I have something, we'll email. And I mean, I have dreams at night time that they're going to email me and say, they're just waiting for Neil Magny to recover and he's good to go for Sydney. I'll be happy to knock him out and give him his walking papers, give him his 3rd knockout in a row. But who knows? I don't know. Honestly, like at this point, like we're getting close to Sydney now, so whoever they slap down, that's the opponent. But I do hope that they're planning something good. Surely they want to give like an Aussie. Like I'm teetering. I've always been teetering on the rankings, so hopefully they want to make that a point and make it a big fight in front of a home crowd. That'd be awesome.
That was that thing that I was talking about. Like it feels like there's like a new wave sometimes, and it goes back to like the grudge situation. Like that's what I was kind of saying. Like almost in the point, like they sometimes don't treat Jake Matthews as hot a product anymore because he's been around for a decade.
Yeah, look, I don't really blame them for that. Like if it's business. Someone like Jack Dalla comes in, he's on a tear. They're going to give him the sponsors. They're going to give him this, give him that, give him the opponents. That's, you know what I mean? That's kind of one of the downfalls of being in the UFC for so long, is that the honeymoon phase kind of wears off. But it's on me to step up and, when I knock the next 3 guys out cold, then they're going to start throwing me those things, and I'm going to be up there with Jack. And yeah, so I know my time's coming very soon.
Charles Oliveira. I mean, for ages, he was just a guy that was around, and then he
Dustin Poirier was a journeyman for most of his career. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, and the age, it's all, like I'm saying, I'm feeling it, mate. It's like it's peaking all at the right time.
If you spoke to my coaches now, a lot of people say this and coaches blow wind up people's asses, but I'm not even in a training camp right now. And if you spoke to my coaches and got the feedback, even myself, like, I honestly couldn't tell you like where this new level of Jake Matthews has come from. Like, I've just come off a layoff from an injury, been back training for a few months, if that. But it's just physically and mentally, I feel like things have changed just as I've gotten older. So yeah, I mean, I really, really believe that run is coming, that peak is coming. Or it's here, if not.
Well, finally, mate, before I do let you go, I ask everyone this, so I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you. After it's all said and done, how does Jake Matthews want to be remembered in mixed martial arts?
All I want to do, if my biggest regret is that I finished fighting and I didn't show everyone what I was capable of. Like the Andre Fialho fight, that's in 10 years, I've had one fight where I've shown, that's not even 100% what I'm capable of. That was zero grappling. That was all striking, all boxing. There's so many more aspects to Jake Matthews. And if my career finishes and I don't get to show what I can do, that'll be the biggest regret. And that'll haunt me till the day that I die. So that's, and if I do, so people go, oh, your goal should be the belt. If I show everyone what I'm capable of, the belt will come with that, because that's honestly how good I am. I just need to do what I do in the gym, in the octagon. And then that's it.
Okay.
It's that simple.
Mr. Jake Matthews, it's been an absolute honor. Thank you so much for taking the time, and hopefully we chat again soon.
I appreciate it, bro. Thank you.
Thank you, mate.